Hi, second graders. Today we're going to read about stories called Those Shoes. This is one of Miss Nason's very favorite books. It's by Mary Beth Boats, and Noah Jones is the illustrator. I want you to think about, before we start, something that you've wanted so bad. Maybe you wanted it for your birthday. Maybe you wanted it for another special day. Maybe for Christmas. Or maybe for another holiday. This boy in our story wants some shoes so bad. We're going to find out what the problem with that is. So we're going to be doing shared retelling cards. You're not going to usually see them on a chart tablet like this because you're usually going to have a card and you're going to do your part in sharing. But I decided to do this, so I'm going to write it out so we can do it together. Remember, we're going to talk about in the beginning. Next, the problem is the conflict of the story. After that, then, and then finally, how does the conflict get resolved, the resolution? All right, before we start, I want to talk about a thrift store, thrift shop, because he's going to talk about a thrift shop in this. I've been to a thrift shop many, many times. A thrift shop's, I know a Goodwill is a thrift shop. A thrift shop, people bring things that they're not going to use anymore, and they take them and they donate them to the thrift shop. And then people can go and buy those things from the thrift shop for a lot cheaper price. For instance, Miss Nason takes clothes once a year to the Goodwill, and they sell them to other people for a lot cheaper. So they've been worn before, but they're in good shape. And I also like to go to a thrift shop like this one. This one's called the Rerun Thrift Shop. I also like to go to a thrift shop, the Goodwill's usually where I go, to be able to go get clothes that are at a cheaper price. Sometimes I go to look for books for my classroom. Sometimes I've gone to get toys. So you're going to hear him talk about a thrift shop. So let's start. Those shoes. We're going to read it, and then we'll do our shared retelling. Shared retellings are very quick. All right, those shoes. Here's the title page. You can see our characters. I have dreams about those shoes. Black high tops, 2 white stripes. You can see him in the picture. Here he is. He's got big dreams about those shoes. Grandma, I want them. There's no room for want around here. Just need, Grandma says, and what you need are new boots for winter. So he wants those shoes really bad, but Grandma's like, but you need boots. Brandon T comes to school in those shoes. He says he's the fastest runner now, not me. I was always the fastest before those shoes came along. Nate comes to school in those shoes. Antonio and I count how many times he goes to the bathroom just so he can show off his shoes. Next, Alan Jacoby and Terrence each get a pair. If you look in this picture, you can see everybody wearing those shoes. Then one day in the middle of kickball, one of my shoes comes apart. Looks like you could use a new pair of shoes, Jeremy, Mr. Alfrey says. He brings out a box of shoes and other stuff he has for kids who needs things. He helps me find the only shoes that are my size. Velcro, like the ones my little sister wears. They have an animal on them from a cartoon I don't think anyone's ever watched. Mr. Alfred gives him a pair of shoes because he needs them. But does he want them? When I come back to the classroom, Alan Jacoby takes one look at my Mr. Alfred shoes and laughs. And so does Terrence, Brandon T, and everyone else. The only coot who's not laughing is Antonio Parker. At home, Grandma says, "How kind of Mr. Alfrey." I nod and turn my back. I'm not going to cry over those dumb shoes. But when I'm writing with my spelling words later, every word looks like the word shoes. And my grip is so tight on my pencil, I think it might bust. He really wants those shoes. On Saturday, Grandma says, "Let's check out those shoes you're wanting so much. I got a little bit of money set aside. Maybe we could get one. You never know." At the shoe store, Grandma turns the shoes over so she can check the price, and when she sees it, she sits down very heavy. "Maybe they wrote it down wrong," I say. Grandma shakes her head. Then I remember the thrift shops. What if there's a rich kid who outgrew his or got 2 pairs for Christmas and had to give one of them away? We ride the bus to the first thrift shop. Black cowboy boots, pink slippers, sandals, and high heels, but not those shoes. We ride the bus to the second thrift shop. Not a pair of those shoes in sight. And the corner of the third thrift shop, I see something in the window. There's the thrift shop. He sees them in the window. Black shoes with 2 white stripes, high tops, perfect shape, $2.50. Those shoes. So someone did bring them to the thrift shop, and the thrift shop's going to sell them for much less than the regular store. My heart is pounding. I take off my shoes, hitch up with my baggy socks. "How exciting," Grandma says. "What size are they?" I shove my shoe in the first shoe, curling my toes to get my heel in. I don't know, but I think they fit. If you got to curl your toes to put your shoes on, they don't fit. But he wanted them so bad. Grandma kneels on the floor and feels my toes at the end of the shoe. "Oh, Jeremy," she says, "I can't spend good money on shoes that don't fit." I put the other shoe on and try to walk around. "They're okay," I say, holding my breath and praying my toes won't fall off right then and there. But my toes don't fall off. I buy them anyway with my own money, and I squeeze them on and limp to the bus stop. At home, a few days later, Grandma puts a new pair of snow boots in my closet and doesn't say a word about my 2 big feet shuffling around in my 2 small shoes. "Sometimes shoes stretch," I say. Grandma gives me a hug. I don't know if you can see it, but on his little feet there's a lot of Band-Aids because his feet hurt so bad from wearing shoes that don't fit. Grandma got him those black boots because that's what he needs. I check every day, but those shoes don't stretch. I have to wear my Mr. Alfie's to school instead. One day during math, I glance at Antonio's shoes. One of them's taped up, and his feet look smaller than mine. After school, I head to the park to think. Antonio's there. He's the only kid who didn't laugh at my Mr. Alfie shoes. We shoot baskets. A loose piece of tape on Antonio's shoe smacks the concrete every time he jumps. I think, I'm not gonna do it. We leap off the swings. I'm not gonna do it. We race from one end of the playground to the other. I'm not gonna do it, I say. Do what? Antonio says, breathing hard. Antonio's shoes have tape on them. What do you think he's thinking about doing? Grandma calls me for supper and invites Antonio over too. After supper, he spies my shoes. How come you don't wear them? Antonio asks. I shrug. I don't know. My hands are sweaty and I can feel him wishing those shoes were his. That night, I lay awake for a long time thinking about Antonio. And when morning comes, I try my shoes on one last time. before I can change my mind, the shoes are in my coat. Snow is beginning to fall as I run across the street to Antonio's apartment. I put the shoes in front of his door, push the doorbell, and run. At school, Antonio's smiling big with his brand new shoes, and I feel happy when I see his face and mad when I look at my Mr. Alfie shoes. But later, when it's time for recess, something happens. Everywhere there's snow. Leave your shoes in the hall and change into your boots, the teacher announces. Leave your shoes in the hall? It's then I remember what I have in my backpack. New boots. New black boots that no kid's ever worn before. Standing in line to go to recess, Antonio leans forward and says, "Thanks." I smile and give him a nudge. Let's race. I love that story. All right, let's do our retell with our shared retell cards. Just a quick way to think about some of the parts of the story. And again, good readers can look back. Will you help me do this? Maybe Scooter and Maggie can help me too. All right, let's put the title of our book, Those Shoes. Those shoes. Okay, I want you to put on your thinking cap and let's think about what happened in the beginning of our story. Can we remember what happened? What do we know right away in the beginning of our story? You thinking? That's right. In the beginning of the story, Jeremy wants those shoes. Wants those shoes. Next, do you remember what he did next? He wants those shoes so bad, right? And who does he talk to? After he goes to school and sees everybody's got them on. He talks to Grandma, doesn't he? And what does Grandma tell him? We need to think about what you need, not what you want, right? So he tries to talk to Grandma about it, goes to school, and everybody has them on. So next, he talks to Grandma about maybe getting those shoes. Being able to get the shoes. To get those shoes. Okay, so Jeremy wants those shoes and he talks to Grandma about it, and Grandma says, we need to get what you need, not what you want. And the problem is what? Can you think about what the problem is? Remember what happens when Grandma takes him to the store to see if he can get those shoes? What does she find out? They cost way too much, right? So the problem is the shoes cost a lot. And what does he need? Do you remember? He needs what? Snow boots. So the shoes cost too much. And he needs snow boots, right? Up here and add something. Sometimes you can go back if you need to if you remember something you forgot. Remember he talks to Grandma about being able to get those shoes, but also his counselor gives him a new pair at school that he doesn't like. Do you remember that? Mr. Alfie, his counselor, Mr. Alfie gives him shoes he doesn't like after his are broken, right? Gives him shoes he doesn't like. Remember, he gets embarrassed and everybody makes fun of him. So after that, after they find out that they're just too much and he needs snow boots, after that, do you remember what they do? What's that word we learned? They go to a lot of thrift stores, right? And they find a pair, but what's wrong with it? It's too little. But he gets them anyway, doesn't he? So after that, he buys them at a thrift store, but they're way too small. Jeremy buys them from a thrift store, right? That was our word we learned. Buys them from a thrift shop. Remember what a thrift shop is? That's where you can get things that aren't as much as they are at a regular store because people have already worn them. Jeremy buys them from a thrift shop, but they are too little. Remember also, Grandma buys him his snow boots, right? His snow boots. Okay, so then, do you remember what he decides to do? What's he decide to do while he's playing ball with Antonio? What does he decide to do? Even though he says he's not going to do it, he gives his shoes to Antonio. Then he gives his shoes to Antonio. Let's think about the end. How was that problem? Remember the problem? The shoes cost too much and he needs snow boots. How is that resolved in the end? How is that problem solved? How is this problem? Remember at the end, he goes outside and remembers he's got his brand new snow boots, and Antonio has his shoes as well, so they can go outside and play together. So finally, he's happy with his new snow boots. And he and Anthony go outside and race. All right, so we did our little shared retelling. Let's reread it really quickly. So in the beginning, Jeremy wants those shoes. He wants them more than anything. So next, he talks to Grandma about being able to get those shoes, and his counselor, Mr. Alfie, gives him shoes he doesn't like. So the problem is the shoes cost too much and he needs snow boots. So after that, Jeremy buys them from a thrift shop, but they're too little, and Grandma buys him his snow boots. Then he gives his shoes to Antonio, who needs shoes as well. And then finally, the resolution, how it's resolved is, he's happy with his new snow boots, and he and Anthony go outside and race. I'm going to add one more thing. He's also happy that he gives Antonio, he's also happy to Antonio has his shoes. He is also happy that Antonio has his shoe, has those shoes. So when you do shared retelling, it's just a good way to go over what happened in the story. So next week we're going to work on it as well. I hope everybody enjoyed our story, those shoes. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. Bye, second grade.